Drew Brees, up until today, and I still think for a while, is being lambasted over his answer to a question that was in an interview on Yahoo Finance, right? Which, again, you start to, of the people I feel for today, good luck if you're Yahoo Finance, finding a way to book an athlete, right? Like, no thanks. But there's a reason why there was such a backlash for what he said. Now, what we're going to do for you is play the answer that everyone's talking about, combined with the question, because it's very important to have full context of question and answer. But maybe even more interesting, or in terms of context, is we're also going to play for you the Q&A immediately before that question. And then we'll have a discussion. We'll talk about some of the tweets, the relationship things that he's going to have to go through, and the apology which Drew Brees penned earlier today and put out on his Instagram page. All right, first, let's just give you, this is the answer. The question was asked about the potential for the kneeling protest to return to the National Football League this upcoming season in 2020 as a guy who is seen as a leader in the league, a 13-time Pro Bowler, former Walter Payton Man of the Year award recipient. Here was Drew Brees' answer, which, of course, set the Twitter world on fire.
I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II. So every time I stand with my hand over my heart, looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears, thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military, but for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movements of the 60s, and everyone and all that has been endured by so many people up until this point. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Drew Brees is more than just the guy with the most passing yards in NFL history, most completions, most touchdown passes, the highest career passing percentage, of course, a Super Bowl champion and a future Hall of Famer. And by the way, he signed a contract to become a broadcaster with NBC whenever his career expires with the New Orleans Saints. More than that, as the former Walter Payton Man of the Year, a guy who just donated $5 million to COVID relief, like, he is a staple of the NOLA community, right? Like, this guy has been solid. So I'm sure it struck many as at least surprising and alarming and disappointing that he seemed to miss the one word which we all kind of need to have right now, which is empathy, right? That's really what felt like it was missing. And there's just the timing aspect to it, because that was a stock answer. That's the answer. I was listening to Dan Patrick driving in on Fox Sports Radio, and Dan said, look, that's the same answer he gave to me going back 4 years ago. You asked me about flag, I talk about my grandpa's, and it's like a politician. You go to your kind of stock answer, and you talk about unity. But you had to think, Drew, have you looked outside your window, right? Like, whether you want to call it a revolution or just protests for that are demanding change, somewhere in between the two, the entire world is starting to check themselves and try and have empathy for people of color and the way in which they've been treated, not just by police, but frankly by society, and try and make ourselves better, which may have been his answer in the end. But when you start out as defiant as, I will never agree with someone who disrespects the flag, there are trigger words there, which sends alarm bells off to everyone. Joy, what was your immediate feeling the second that you heard that question and answer?
Hurt. I was hurt by what he said.
Why?
Because I have a lot of respect for Drew Brees, and I have expectations of him because he's put himself in a position of leadership, and he is a very philanthropic person. So I expected him to be more aware of not only the environments that society's in right now, but the power that those words can have for people who are looking to latch on to anything that goes against what the movement is trying to do.
Yeah, it was interesting because you felt like it kind of came out of left field. It did not feel, whether or not he was trying to answer the question, it did not feel that it fit with the time. When I first saw it, I was like, well, was this from a couple years ago? Was this from a couple months ago? When was this from? I was like, no, this is from today. Now, Drew has since apologized. Quote from his IG page, his Instagram page. I would like to apologize to my friends, teammates, and the city of New Orleans, the black community, the NFL community, and anyone I hurt with my comments yesterday. In speaking with some of you, it breaks my heart to know the pain that I've caused. In an attempt to talk about respect, unity, solidarity, centered around the American flag and the national anthem, I made comments that were insensitive and completely missed the mark on the issues we are facing now in our country. They lacked awareness and any type of compassion or empathy. I thought they could have ended it right there. He went on to kind of a statement of who he is. Now, let's be fair to Drew Brees. And maybe this is the part which is kind of odd, right? You factor in that Drew Brees, though he didn't kneel during the national anthem before the first game of the season, back when it was Kaepernick and when Colin Kaepernick started the kneeling protest that spread around the National Football League. He did kneel with his teammates, locked arm in arm, right before the national anthem. So if you think this one was out of left field, this was the question right before he had the answer, which has gone viral.
I think that we accomplish greater things as a community, as a society, and as a country when we do it together. And I think that we are all equipped with great talents, abilities, and strengths, and we can use that with each other and for each other. I think we can accomplish some amazing things. And obviously, these are trying times during our country, certainly coming out of this COVID crisis and then entering into another crisis, or really these two compounding with each other. I think we all recognize the changes that need to take place. And I do think it's about action versus just, everybody's going to social media and kind of saying their piece. Obviously, there are riots and there are protests, and people are certainly out there showing their frustration as well. But I think at the end of the day, we need to find ways to work together, to provide opportunities for one another, to continue to move our country forward to a bigger and better place.
That's the perfect answer that he could have had in addition to the flag question, right? The idea of working together and understanding that the protests, while it's gotten people's attention, we need to find a way to keep evolving. I like to think of it as, and even think of myself. Do you know that photo of the evolution of man? Where at the start, he's Cro-Magnon, he's curled over. And at the end, he's standing up, he's Homo erectus, he's standing up straight. We're all kind of in the middle there, right? Different levels of evolution, or at least me personally. I look at how I view things. When I had a ill-timed tweet going back to when Eric Garner was killed by a police officer in Staten Island, when the first I Can't Breathe shirts came out, right? And I started to understand shortly thereafter from many of my African-American friends, hey, dude, you got to understand what's going on out there and how you're perceived, but more than anything, how we are perceived anytime we get pulled over or anytime something goes down. People look at us like all of a sudden we're the ones who did something wrong. And maybe I didn't realize it at the time. And you start to evolve in your feelings. You start to understand how other people see the world. Now, I will point out, and this is really, really important. Look, Drew Brees' biggest mistake, in my opinion, is that all of his answers up until that point were about working together. And even the answer at the end was about unity and working together and being better. But the opening salvo to that answer, I will never agree with someone who, whatever it is, I'm not listening. Doesn't really matter what you say. I'm not changing. I'm stuck in here. This is you could have your LeBron. Jordan's better than LeBron. I'm not changing. Well, what if LeBron goes and wins the next 3 NBA titles? Well, I'm not changing because I like Jordan better. It might work in a sports debate, but the true evolving man takes in new information and may move off of that stance. I think that in an effort to try and say, hey, we need to listen and work together, he started his answer by saying, I'm not really listening to anybody because this is how I feel about anybody who kneels before the flag because my grandpa's fought and protected our country. And that goes counter to what the whole idea of this thing is, which is, hey, we got some problems. We got to start listening to one another. Okay? We got to start working together on this. You got to understand and see it a little bit from our perspective. I'm never going to feel what it's like to be African-American, a young African-American male. I can't. It's not physically possible. I can try emotionally, compassionately connect some. And I'll admit I have maybe not blind spot. There's a gap in my understanding of racism because I grew up in a sports household, which it just wasn't ever accepted, thought of as anything that you could act like, whether it's language or how you got along with people. I constantly had basketball players from all over the country, all over the world staying at my house, and whether they were white or black, it didn't matter. And so I admit that because, you feel like you're around black people that what it's like. You don't. You don't. Here's the one thing I feel like people need to remember. Drew, obviously, whether he misspoke or got into his statement about the flag, however he felt, okay? But what Drew was trying to get to was, from his perspective, here's how he saw the flag, and everybody sees it different. He didn't offer up that he was willing to listen to other people's view of the flag. But it has to work both ways. The same people who are saying you have to listen to us have to listen to others. You can't simply say, or you shouldn't, maybe can't, you shouldn't simply say, I need to be heard, but then being unwilling to listen. So the whole world's talking about Drew Brees, and he's issued an apology. First, I'm going to play for you in a second the answer to a question about kneeling before the flag, the potential for it returning to the NFL this year. In a second. We also have an answer from the question right before, which may give you a sense of I read on social media, well, Drew Brees, this is how he really feels. Okay, well, if you play all the answers, if we use everything he's ever said, it seems to be he's a reasonable fella, right? And maybe that's why people have reacted the way they've reacted. Some of it is, and I don't want to say gotcha media, but you react to one line, which seems to really, really miss in terms of timing and in terms of having empathy. Here's Drew Brees and the answer that went viral about National Anthem protests potentially returning in 2020.
I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II. So every time I stand with my hand over my heart, looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears, thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military, but for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movements of the 60s, and everyone and all that has been endured by so many people up until this point. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Can I ask you a question, Joy? When you look at the flag, when the flag is played, when the national anthem is played at a sporting event, you're there. What do you think?
Well, I was actually thinking that when I was listening to Drew Brees talk about it. I consider myself to be a proud American. I love living in America with all of its flaws. I think we have the greatest country in the world, and that's an arrogant American statement because I'm an American. I was born and raised here. My family is mostly military. My sister serves now in the Air Force. My cousin is in the Army. And I'm proud to be an American. But because I'm an American, I also have the right to want America to be better and to be fair. And because I'm an American, I, above everyone else in the world, have the most right to criticize how we do things. So when I look at the flag, I think of our country and where I live and the pride that I have for it and how much more we have to do to be better. So really, when I was listening to Drew talking, his statement is just layered in entitlement. Like the way that he's speaking is like that. I'm inspired by the flag. And when I see the flag, I see unity. So therefore, if you feel or think anything else when you see the flag, you're disrespecting the flag.
I don't take it that way. Now, look, I think we were in agreement, and you tell me if we're disagreeing, okay? I think we'd agree that the first part, when he said, I will disagree, I will never agree with anyone who disrespects the flag. Okay, that because if you take that out, he's giving his own. When I look at the flag, here's what I think, and I don't feel the either one entitlement or the lack of ability for you to have your opinion. He's just saying what he thinks.
Well, the thing is, you can't take that out because that's what he said.
Well, yes, but he says, listen, he says his opening salvo. If I remember correctly, he says his opening salvo. Let me tell you what I think when I see the flag. And yes, he does get into that. Can I tell you what I think when I see the flag?
Sure.
I guess. Doug Gottlieb for Colin, this is The Herd. So I'm almost brought to tears every time I hear the national anthem. And it's because I have this thing in my memory. I have a very good memory, but I also have this thing in my memory where I remember like snapshots and time and places, right? And I played 3 seasons overseas. I haven't traveled as much overseas as I would like since having children, but I've traveled overseas a good amount. Obviously go down to Mexico, whatever. And every time I return home, it was usually at JFK, sometimes LAX. Every time you return home, you're in that, they have the glass kind of walkway that takes you right to customs. And you almost always walk by Old Glory. And you just think, God, this is the best, right? Like, so much better here. And I could tell you about amazing places. Like the fish I had in Lithuania are incredible. The weather and the people and the culture in Israel is amazing. And I love the smells and the art of but there ain't any place I'd rather live than right here. And I've lived other places. And I respect other places, but this is the best. And I think, how lucky am I, right? Like, for 20 years, based upon an above average college basketball career and a very average professional playing career, I've been able to make a good living and provide for my children and provide for myself in retirement because I like to talk about sports. Like, that's pretty amazing. There's other kind of layers to it in terms of my family and, coming off of, you see Ellis Island when you come in, and I think of my great-grandparents, my Booby and my Zadie coming in, and the fear of the unknown and the bravery that they showed to just get on that boat to get here. Like, I do think of all those things, but that's my personal perspective. Now, when I think of it, I think, man, we won the lottery in terms of where we live. But I think where he misses, and so my first thing is, I do think we need to learn to respect that other people see the exact same thing we see and think differently.
That's what I'm saying. Like, your experience when you hear the national anthem and you see the flag is different from my experience and is different from Drew's experience. So when he says he's not going to he'll never respect anyone who disrespects the flag, is disregarding anyone else's experience with the flag. But that's not the reason why people are upset. The reason that people are upset is his protest is not about the flag. It has nothing to do with the flag. And because of the presentation that the flag and the national anthem has become at sporting events, there is a psychological association that has come with the flag and the national anthem with the military, when in fact, the national anthem has nothing to do with the military. It's the national anthem. You're not in the military. I'm not in the military. We can still sing the national anthem. We can still stand for the national anthem because it's about country. There's a psychological association that when you hang a flag, you're supporting the military. And maybe you are, but that doesn't mean that because I don't have a flag up, I'm not supporting the military. It has nothing to do with the military or the flag. It's just a moment. His protest was in that moment because that is a presentation when everyone is watching. It's going to have the most impact because it's about awareness. That's why when you use a platform, a large platform, it's going to get the most eyeballs for awareness.
Yes.
It's not about disrespecting the flag. And that's why people are upset, because this was years ago and Drew's had to have had conversations about this. It's not about the flag.
I listen, I do understand that it's about police brutality. I get it.
Right.
I've always disagreed with the idea that it's not disrespectful. It is. Now, it's intentionally disrespectful. We're showing disrespect so that you pay attention to what we feel like is a major issue in our country, right? That's what it is. You're not listening, and the only way to get your attention is to make a public display during a time in which you're supposed to be reverent and stand up and put your hand over your heart or hands behind your back and pay attention, right? I don't tie it to the military. I don't. I do tie it to our country, and I respect anybody's right to protest. I do think that it's disrespectful, but I also think that it's intentionally disrespectful. And that may be kind of dancing around words to some people, but that's how I've always viewed it. Now, look, Kaepernick lost control. They lost control of the narrative for no other reason than Kaepernick disappeared in terms of he has the ability to sit on that couch or any couch he wants in America and have every eyeball on him and say beyond a reasonable doubt what it is about, why it's important. Because right now, he doesn't have to take a victory lap, but he or somebody could be leading this movement, could have been leading this movement for the last, 4 years since the original protest. And so that's why I think that whether it's Black Lives Matter or just simply the NFL players that chose to kneel lost kind of control of the narrative was there was no leader. There was no one talking.
Well, and it also became politicized because our president decided to get involved.
Agreed. But again, like Kaepernick has had the ability to have a press conference or do interviews whenever.
There's been so many, the reason that Malcolm Jenkins was crying, aside from the sheer disappointment in Drew Brees, which I shared with him, is the frustration. So, like you asked me at the beginning of the show how I felt. I was hurt and frustrated because the conversation, whether it's been Kaepernick or anyone else, has been had ad nauseum about what the purpose of the protest is. If you are very much like Drew Brees, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying in general. If you're dug in on what you feel or think about Kaepernick's protests, then that's your decision. But that doesn't change reality. Like, you can scream every day that the sky is green, but I can look up and see that the sky is blue. So if you've decided that that's how you want to live your life, that's your decision. But that doesn't change what the purpose of it was. Like, you can feel it's disrespectful, Drew Brees can feel it's disrespectful, and then there can be an entire community of people that feels it's not disrespectful. It's a show of solidarity and awareness, and those can be different.
Yes.
But in this situation, when Drew Brees is talking about that, he's redirecting the conversation, and that's another reason why people are so upset.
Which is part of what we just had was a conversation over it, right? We're not even having a conversation about police brutality, which is what it's supposed to be about, but just having a conversation, which is ultimately the flaw of Drew Brees' statement yesterday, which was, I don't want to have a conversation, basically saying, I don't want to have a conversation.
Yeah, he said he's dug in.
Right. And that is what is missing. Here's what I want to do. Coming up next, I want to play for you the other audio that is not played, to my knowledge, hasn't been played anywhere else. It's just a question that was asked right before this question was asked. Then we'll read his apology, and then we'll discuss whether or not this is recoverable for Drew Brees from a guy who was Walter Payton Man of the Year, all-time completions, touchdowns, yada, 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 surefire, first ballot Hall of Famer, going to be on NBC. But in the world of the insular world of professional football, can he recover? We discuss next in The Herd.